Chapter 13. The Winds of Fate. The storm on the horizon raged violently, its dark clouds twisting like a living beast, snarling and seething as streaks of unnatural lightning carved through the heavens. The air had grown thick, heavy with impending doom. Back in the encampment, the tension was palpable. Warriors prepared for battle. Villagers gathered supplies, and the spirits, Koga, Lancelot, and Leonidas, remained on high alert, their instincts warning them that something far worse than mere monsters was on its way. Inside the medic's hut, Yunhai's body trembled as she sat upright in bed, sweat dripping from her brow. A voice whispered in her mind, low and commanding,
"Awaken, child. The time has come."
Her fingers twitched, and suddenly, a violent gust of wind erupted from her body, knocking over medical tools and sending curtains billowing as if caught in a hurricane. The nearby medic gasped, shielding herself from the sudden burst of energy. Yunhei clutched her chest, her breathing ragged. She could feel it. Something deep inside her had awakened. Then, as if drawn by an unseen force, she staggered out of the hut, the wind whipping around her in a wild dance. Will, Caleb, and Terence stood near the tower, strategizing, when they saw Yunhai emerge from the hut.
"What's she doing out here?" Will muttered, narrowing his eyes.
She took shaky steps forward, eyes wide with something between fear and understanding. Then, a golden glow ignited on her right hand.
Koga's eyes widened. "So it's true?"
Before anyone could react, a vortex of emerald green energy erupted into the sky, spiraling above Yunhai as the wind roared like a living entity. And then, it appeared. Descending from the sky like a deity of the storm, a spirit clad in flowing white and green robes, her hair like wisps of silver, caught in an eternal breeze, her piercing golden eyes glowing with ancient power. Her presence alone made the winds howl, her very existence bending the air itself.
Koga took a step forward, voice steady but reverent. "So, Shiva has chosen her vessel."
The spirit's gaze landed on Yunhai.
"You have suffered. You have endured." Her voice was like a rolling gale, both gentle and devastating. "Now you shall rise."
Yunhei gasped as energy surged through her veins. Her once weak limbs now pulsed with newfound power. Words she didn't fully understand spilled from her lips as she called upon her spirit's name.
"Shiva, grant me your power. Tempest Vale."
Instantly, the winds around her exploded outward, forming a shimmering barrier of pure, concentrated air. Leaves, dust, and debris swirled wildly within the encampment, but Yunhai stood unharmed within the eye of the storm.
Terence whistled. "Well, damn."
Will grinned. "Looks like we've got ourselves another heavy hitter."
Caleb, still catching his breath from the sheer pressure of the spirit's presence, gave Yunhai a nod. "We're going to need every advantage we can get."
Because at that moment, the sky above them cracked. A thunderous boom shook the land as the ominous storm over the mountains began to move. The moment the first black lightning bolt struck the outskirts of the encampment, the villagers screamed. Dark figures emerged from the swirling shadows, twisted creatures with skeletal armor, glowing red eyes, and jagged blades dripping with malice.
"The Dark Ones," Lancelot muttered, gripping his sword.
From the distance, an eerie, deep voice echoed through the sky.
"I see you, little heroes. I see your pathetic attempts to resist. And now, I have come to remind you.
A burst of black fire erupted in the distance, consuming the trees beyond the encampment.
That you are nothing.
The voice belonged to Antares. For the first time, they could feel his presence, not just as a warlord, not just as a conqueror, but as something more, something far beyond mortal comprehension. The very air turned sick with his power.
Koga's expression darkened. This is bad. If we fight him in the open, he'll crush us.
Yunhai, still pulsing with energy, clenched her fists. Then we don't fight him in the open.
Will nodded. We need to draw him in, control the battlefield, use the terrain.
Before any of them could move, however, the sky itself shattered. A blinding column of golden light speared down from the heavens, cutting through the darkness like a divine blade. And within that light, a voice, calm yet absolute, rang through the battlefield.
Antares, you have gone too far.
Antares' monstrous energy recoiled, like a predator recognizing something far greater than itself. The heroes turned their gaze upward. A figure stood at the center of the divine light, a being of pure energy, cloaked in radiant robes of white and gold, their face veiled in a cosmic glow.
Koga's breath hitched. It can't be.
Lancelot lowered his blade, eyes wide with awe.
Caleb stepped forward. Who is that?
Koga's voice trembled slightly as she answered. That is the absolute being.
And with their arrival, the battle was no longer just a war of mortals. It had become a war of gods. The air was heavy with divine energy, a force so overwhelming that even the strongest warriors in the camp could barely stand. The absolute being loomed above, a celestial entity whose presence defied mortal comprehension, while Antares, his once overwhelming aura, now flickering with frustration, glared with burning hatred. Before the tension could reach its breaking point, Koga took a deep breath and stepped forward.
This was inevitable, she murmured. Antares, the great destroyer, was always meant to rise again.
Caleb turned to Koga, his expression tense. You're talking like you've seen this before.
Koga's gaze darkened. Because I have.
A gust of wind swept through the battlefield as Koga gathered her thoughts, and then she began to speak. The story of the absolute being.
Long ago, before time, before stars, before even the concept of light existed, there was only one.
Koga's voice carried over the battlefield, her words pulling in everyone's attention. Even Antares, despite his anger, listened in silence.
The absolute being. He was alone in the void, a force without equal, and, in his loneliness, he did something that changed existence itself. He created. From his own essence, he birthed the first 7 gods, each one representing a force of balance in the universe. Koga began listing them off, her voice steady yet reverent. Baragon, the god of law, the guardian of order and justice. Morgoth, the god of fortune, the weaver of fate and destiny. Luna, the goddess of love, the force that binds souls together. Keto, the god of time, the keeper of past, present, and future. Ara, the goddess of will, the embodiment of strength and perseverance. And finally, Antares, the god of destruction. For centuries, these gods existed in harmony, maintaining the balance of all things, until we were born.
The fall of Antares.
The moment mortal life emerged, the balance shifted. The gods who once lived in peace suddenly had to watch over lesser beings. Some, like Luna and Ara, embraced their new roles. Others, like Baragon and Keto, saw it as their duty to maintain control. But one saw only weakness. Koga's gaze hardened as she turned his eyes toward Antares. Antares looked upon the world of mortals and saw nothing but fragile, insignificant creatures. He despised them, hated them. He sought power, destruction, and total annihilation of anything lesser than himself. He believed that only the strong should exist, that only gods had the right to rule the cosmos.
Caleb clenched his fists. And that's what started the war?
Koga nodded. Yes, the War of the Gods. A war so cataclysmic, it nearly shattered the universe itself. Antares led an army of divine warriors, monsters, and celestial titans against the other gods. The battle raged for millennia. Entire realms burned away in his conquest. It wasn't until the Absolute Being himself intervened that the war finally ended. Antares was struck down and banished to the abyss, locked away for eternity. Or so we thought. And now, he's returned.
The weight of Koga's words settled over the group. The truth was undeniable. This war had been set in motion long before any of them were even born, and they were caught in the middle of it. Keto's arrival. Before Koga could continue, a sudden ripple in space split the air behind him. A tall figure emerged from the distortion. His body wrapped in flowing robes of silver and deep blue, his eyes glowing with a brilliance that seemed to contain the entire timeline of existence. Keto, the god of time, had arrived. He spoke in a voice that resonated through reality itself. The Absolute Being has given his orders. Everyone turned to face him as he raised a hand. You are not ready for this battle.
Caleb's eyes widened. What?
Keto continued, unshaken by protests or confusion. If you fight Antares now, you will all die. It is not a possibility. It is a certainty.
Lancelot stepped forward, gripping his sword. So what? We're supposed to run?
Keto glanced at him with an expression that was neither cruel nor kind, only inevitable. You will retreat. You will train. You will grow. He lifted his hand, and the world itself began to bend. I will transport you all to the great city of Majula. Light erupted from Keto's hand, engulfing everything in a blinding radiance.
Antares roared in fury. No, you will not escape me.
With terrifying speed, Antares launched himself toward the group, his blade wreathed in black fire. But before he could strike, a golden fist slammed into him, sending him crashing into the distant mountains. The Absolute Being had moved, and with that final act, Keto's power completed the spell. A blinding flash of white consumed everything. The arrival at Majula. In an instant, the heroes, the villagers, and the entire encampment vanished from the battlefield. The next thing they knew, they stood at the outskirts of Majula, the great city. Sprawling towers of silver and gold stretched toward the heavens. Rivers of crystal clear water glowed softly under the sun. The air itself was filled with a strange, ancient magic, powerful yet peaceful. They had been saved.
Koga exhaled, tension draining from her body. We made it.
Shiva, her energy still swirling around Yunhei, nodded. Indeed.
But as the heroes gazed upon the city, they knew the war was far from over. They had escaped Antares, for now. But the battle for the world had only just begun.